Welcome to UAspire's Student Debt Impact Presentation, Financing Education and Economic Opportunity, sponsored by Altos Ventures and State Street. I present to you Jacqueline Pinero, National CEO of UAspire.
Good morning to our guests out here in the West. Good afternoon to those of you joining on the East Coast. My name is Jacqueline Pinero, and on behalf of UAspire, I am thrilled to welcome you to this very important conversation on the growing national student loan debt crisis. I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank our sponsors for today, Altos Ventures and State Street, for making this discussion possible. The work we do here at UAspire is personal to me. As a first-generation American and the first in my family to have graduated college, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about and honor the sacrifices that my grandparents made by bringing my parents as young children to this country to access opportunities that did not exist for them in their native countries. There also isn't a day that goes by that I don't reflect on how my college degree has changed the trajectory of my life and how it will continue to change the trajectory of subsequent generations in my family, including my own 2 children. But beyond that, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't reflect on how my degree enables me to be here in this exact moment with you today, representing an organization like UAspire and working with each of you to ensure that young people across the country have the same opportunity, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of their country of origin, and most importantly, regardless of the color of their skin. As we come together today here, a college degree has never been more necessary or expensive. UAspire serves a very critical role in the college access and attainment ecosystem. Our laser focus on helping students and families remove the financial barriers to attending and graduating from college uniquely positions us to deliver impact in multiple ways. Financing a college degree, one of the most expensive decisions a person will make in their lives, is at the core of earning a degree. While governmental and institutional actions are necessary to fully remove these financial barriers, UAspire works tirelessly to translate, to pull back the curtain, to break down the barriers so that students can access the dollars available to them. As you see here, during the 2019-2020 academic year, over 900,000 students across the country received guidance and direct benefit through our work as UAspire. Whether it was advising students one-on-one in our 3 core geographies, whether it was training practitioners to build their capacity and expertise to help even more students access dollars, or whether it was changing the unequal and cumbersome systems that make aid difficult to administer and direct to where it's most needed. Our multifaceted approach, our tools, and our resources position students and families to make sound financial decisions based on their own unique situation. Taking a moment to specifically highlight how we do our work, we develop products like our cost college calculator, that represents a type of open source innovation that gives our students and stakeholders access to important information and that can unlock true decision-making power so that students can choose a school based on their situation. We engage in focused services like our direct advising. Our ability to directly connect with students and their affordability journey starts here. Our advising is the engine that powers our deep expertise, because as much as we teach and advise students, we listen and we learn to each student and family as we serve them and as we work to deepen our expertise and continuously improve our services. We also develop solutions, calling out here our systems change work. Systems of higher education must break the cycles of poverty and not exacerbate them. Yet in order to rebuild systems that empower students, students need to be at the center of those designs and of those conversations. And we know as You Aspire that our students are our true experts. I wish I had more time here to take you through our Student Fellows advocacy work that highlights how we position and work with students at the center of systems change, but you can find more information about that on our website. And finally, so what does this all mean for our students? How does our work deliver on our mission? As the data on this slide shows, our work has translated into key learnings and impact. We have seen and documented material impact in our students' persistence and graduation rates. As the challenges facing students who lack the financial resources to pay for college out of pocket, students who are the first in their family to attend and graduate college, and the systemic inequities that make obstacles steeper for students who identify as Latinx, Black, Asian Pacific Islander, and Indigenous, graduating in 4 years isn't always an obtainable goal. Degree attainment timelines of 5, 6, 7, up to 8 years to complete a bachelor's degree are no longer uncommon. And these timelines directly translate to deeper and more severe mounting debt costs for students. While we cannot solve this problem alone, our work has and continues to demonstrate that our approach delivers deep impact to students and to our shared communities. So now what you've all been waiting for, please join me in welcoming to our Zoom stage our esteemed moderator and panelists, Helene, Asha, and Naomi, that will be leading our conversation today. Before I pass the mic over to you, Helene, I would just like to thank the three of you ladies for your time today and for sharing your expertise, your perspectives, and the solutions that you see that could be possible to solve this crisis. Over to you, Helene.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to hear this great panel on the impact of student debt. I'm here with Asha and Naomi. Asha, can you say your last name? I thought that I didn't realize I was going to introduce
Sure.
you. I'm going to mispronounce your last name, so I want you to do it. And the
No
same
worries
for you,
at all.
Naomi.
I'm sure it's Asha Shrikantaya,
Okay.
and I head up a student debt program at Fidelity Investments that's focused on improving the outcomes for primarily employees in the workforce who are carrying student debt.
And Naomi, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Naomi Zodi. I'm an assistant professor at the City University of New York, CUNY, the School of Public Health, in health economics, and I study social policy.
Okay. And thank you both of you. I'm just going to say before I plunge in with questions, we are here today in part because there is now about $1.7 trillion in student debt outstanding. That is an amount that has doubled in the past 15 years. That is an amount that is impacting, I was about to say children's lives because I have 2 children in college, but the lives of children, adults, their parents, and often their grandparents. And how did we get here? And what can we do to both mitigate the situation and help people in it? So with that broad outline, I'm going to just plunge in with a question for both of you. Why, that's going to sound really basic. Why do people take out student loans?
I mean, because college is just really expensive. And we've really set up this world where we tell young people all the time, you have to get a degree, you need to go to school, you need to finish school to get a good job and to have a good place in this society. And in the US, college is really expensive. And a lot of people are not going to have the cash to shell out for their kids to attend college for 4 years. And so we've kind of set up a situation where, especially if you want to engage in social mobility, which are going to be particularly the students whose parents won't be able to shell out the cash. So anybody who wants to do social mobility through higher education, they're kind of going to have to take out loans to do that.
Okay, and how does this money, question for both of you, how does this impact people's lives? We know on one hand, it helps them get ahead, as Jacqueline pointed out. for especially first generation college students are probably not going to go at this point, minus loans. But at the same time, it also has impacts on their ability to get ahead financially. Does someone want to take that on?
Sure, I can start there. So what we see is that student debt actually impacts people across all sectors. So unemployed and employed people, people across all geographies in the country, and then also people across all age ranges. And so exactly because of what Naomi just said, college is expensive. It's getting more and more expensive. So over the last 15 years, I think that we've seen the average cost of tuition double. However, it's not like salaries have doubled in that time. And so the gap is widening between what people can afford to pay and what they are being asked to pay for a college education, which is why people are taking out that debt. And then what used to be something that many people were able to pay off. So if you took out student loans in the 80s, you were typically able to pay it off within a 10-year time period. Now, most people, the average is actually to hold on to undergraduate debt for 21 years. So that's just undergrad debt. If you're taking on graduate debt, it could even last longer than that. And then also, adding to that is the fact that, again, because of that pretty big and widening gap between income and the cost of education, many parents are having to take out debt in their own names for their children to attend college, or in some cases, grandparents taking out debt in their own name.
You're talking about the Parent Plus loans, right?
I'm talking about the Parent Plus loans, exactly. And so what that's doing is it is adding $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of new debt to somebody who is, let's say, in their 50s or early 60s, a time that historically would have been, you're kind of winding down in your career, you're looking forward to retirement, you're trying to save everything you can for kind of that next chapter of your life. But now many families are having to contend with, oh, now I have this brand new $50,000 loan that I have to kind of figure out. So when you ask, how is it impacting people? What we do see is that people who are holding student debt tend to be able to contribute less to longer term financial goals that they might have. That ranges from buying a car to buying a home to getting married and paying for a wedding to, yes, saving for retirement. All of these things are impacted by the loan debt that people are carrying at all stages of life.
Okay.
And I would point out that actually almost half of Black college graduates owe more 12 years after graduating than they originally took out, because interest grows faster sometimes than people are able to repay. So it's kind of, you're carrying this debt really across your adult life, always trying to make payments towards it, often not making any progress.
I want to come back
to an
to
indentured servitude model.
I want to come back to the racial equity and also, frankly, a gender equity issue in about a minute. But I want to ask one follow-up question here for both of you, which is, when people initially take these loans, do they realize what exactly they're getting into, or is there kind of a sort of vague feeling, oh, I'll be able to deal with this, and then a recognition after the fact, after graduation, after their children or grandchildren graduate, that, oh my God, I've got to pay this money back, and this is going to have this impact on me? Yeah,
I love that we're on an actual Zoom call and not a webinar, because I'm literally seeing people shaking their heads. Like, do people understand what they're getting into? No, they don't. So yes, there is technically, like, your intake form. When you take out your loans, you're supposed to, click all the boxes and say, yes, I understand, and you sign. And then technically, when you graduate from school and now you're in that repayment period, again, you're supposed to check all the boxes and say, yes, I understand, and you sign. What we know is that that is not effective. People are not actually learning or understanding what that debt means, how much it's actually going to cost them. Naomi, when we were talking the other day, you also said, like, even if you tell somebody who's 18 or even 21 or 22 or 23, yeah, you're going to have to pay $500 a month. It's like, what does that actually mean? And can I do that? And so, do people understand? I would say no, a lot of folks don't.
I agree. A lot of they're like 17, 18 years old, trying to think about, what is my budget going to be like in the future? I've never paid rent before. I've never had to budget for groceries or anything else. So what does it mean? So they really don't understand. But there's also the flip side, where they're also going into it being like, I remember actually hearing this phrase, I'm going to pretend like this is monopoly money because I need to do this in order to go to school right now. And in the future, I'm going to deal with this later. So it's like they know that there is this looming thing that will come and it will slam down in some time in the future. They don't know exactly what that's going to be like, but they have some understanding that like they're kind of doomed, but they have no choice. So let's just check, yes, I understand, and move on with it.
Right. I mean, I can tell you, dealing with kids personally myself, there's this idea that, it sort of varies between out and out fear of them to, oh, I want to go to X school and I'm going to take out loans and I don't care. And it doesn't seem, in both senses, it doesn't actually seem to register, probably for the rather logical reason that, children who are 18, 19 years old actually don't generally do their own budgets. So it's not something they have any real experience with. But this brings up another question, though. I mean, because this does, as we know, this is why we're here, have impacts in people's lives when they graduate school. And it has some good impacts. They are able to earn more money if they're college graduates. But it also really, as as Naomi, I think it was Naomi who pointed it out, it impacts, everything from future college savings to retirement savings to buying a home. And there's a real racial equity and gender equity piece to this. Can you talk about that more for a minute? Naomi, do you want to talk about that?
Naomi, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that,
by the way, not to interrupt, I told you I was coming back to this. So.
Right. So here we are, the coda. I mean, so, I guess it's almost like just the logical outgrowth of the way that we've decided to structure higher education financing. That we will only expect that people who, generationally disadvantaged are not going to have the excess wealth in their family to cover tuition. When the median household income in the United States it's under 60,000 in a year for a family. So, and just 1 year of attendance often costs that much. So there's not going to be that much extra to cover one child to go to school. We just can't expect it to work out that way. But then also, so then we see Black students taking out more debt, and then because of the interest that grows, essentially that credential costs the Black student more on average. And in general, students who have generational disadvantage because they had to take out debt and they have to pay the interest, the degree itself costs more. But then what we see with Black students or Black graduates, and also women of all races, tend to earn less in the labor market, even with the same credential. So now the credential costs you more to get it, but it's less valuable in the labor market. So the financial return to that investment is going to be racially disparate. And in terms of gender, because of the way we divide the labor of having children. Naturally. So that natural process is going to interact again with the labor market, and then putting women less able to pay back their debts. And also, of course, the social value that we put on women's work tends to be lower even when it's the same work as well. So all of those things put women at a disadvantage in being able to pay off their debt, and Black graduates of both genders, of all genders, at a disadvantage to paying off that debt. So all of these things, it kind of just, we could probably have seen this coming.
Right.
I was just going to jump in and say that all the disparities that Naomi just highlighted, they are not trivial. So when you look at the statistics, Black graduates are graduating with, on average, 2 times the amount of debt, double the amount of debt than their white peers upon graduation. And women actually hold 2/3 of the debt outstanding in the country. So really huge economic differentials are being perpetuated by all the factors that Naomi just outlined.
Okay, yeah, I was going to point some of that out, so I'm glad you jumped in on me. That's great, and not great, it's terrible. So, because if I remember right, it was Black students take out more in loans than white students, women take out more than men, and so on. So then the question becomes, I want to switch gears for a second. And what is going on in Washington right now? I mean, there's been a push for forgiveness. Does somebody want to take this on and talk about what different plans are out there and how realistic this all is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, actually,
Go ahead,
Asha,
you
why don't you
start.
start and then I'll go.
Okay, so what we know right now is that obviously as part of the kind of broader coronavirus relief package that was issued back last year in March, the federal government did actually suspend all federal loans for a period of time. And that was initially laid out to be until the end of 2020, and now it's actually been extended until September 30th of this year. So just to kind of pull out from that for just a second, federal debt is basically federally backed loans that are serviced by a variety of different loan service providers. Federal debt collectively composes over 90%. It's actually 92 to 93% of the total debt outstanding in the country. So that's the bulk of what we're talking about here when we're talking about student debt is federal debt. So the federal government has suspended payments on these loans and has suspended interest accrual on these loans. And there is now talk of, with part of the Biden administration, the fact that there may be some cancellation of a portion of loans. When he first came into office, there was a lot of kind of debate as to whether or not he would take executive action on this. He has since made it very clear that he is going to wait for congressional action. He does believe that this is a budgetary item, therefore it should be moving through Congress and voted on through Congress. That's his very strong belief that he's made very clear. And to the best of what we hear today, it sounds like the policy will be to the tune of $10,000 of loan cancellation if it passes. But there are still, I would say, a lot of question marks as to who exactly will this apply to, what industries might they have to work in, what economic, like personal, household income thresholds might they have to kind of comply with in order to get this. So I think we still have a lot of details yet to be fleshed out. So Naomi, you want to jump in?
Actually, I'm going to jump in for one quick second, just to say, I'm going to take questions in about 7 or 8 minutes. So if people in the audience can start sending their questions in via the chat channel, that would just be terrific. Okay, Naomi, take it away.
Yeah, so I have been hearing the number 10,000 recently. I think it's interesting because, so Congress did legislatively designate the president as the person who has the authority to cancel debt, student loan debt specifically. So it is actually the responsibility of the president to cancel this debt. And on their campaign website, it always said, we will cancel a minimum of $10,000. So if they do go with $10,000, it is, as far as they would consider it, the minimum, like the least they could do, really. Mm-hmm. Even if they were to cancel 50,000, approximately 7% of Black households making less than 25,000 a year will still be paying on student loan debt, even if they canceled $50,000 of debt. So $10,000, it really doesn't meet the scale of the problem. So if they are to cancel $10,000 of debt, we'll really be having exactly this same conversation the day after, because we're still going to have a massive student loan debt problem on our hands. And the federal government, it means, will be continuing to reach into the bank accounts of tens of millions of households around the country every month, taking hundreds of dollars. So it's kind of a partial move. I think it's possible, kind of macroeconomically speaking, in terms of just resources to cancel it all, even without finding another way to fill a hole in a federal budget, because of the way the federal government operates. But then there are also other ways of filling holes in budgets, by rearranging or by raising revenues. If we choose to invest in education, it kind of brings to mind the situation in Denmark, where you get 6 years of free tuition, room and board, and a stipend. And you can use that for your undergraduate degree or your graduate degree, or whatever combination, if you want to take extra time, whatever it is. So that's kind of a framework that a nation can use to invest in young people, to have an educated, globally competitive workforce, and we can choose to move in that direction. I think that canceling $10,000 really does none of that. It does nothing about kind of the situation and the structural problems that we're facing.
I was about to say, it seems to point to the fact that even if you cancel debt, you still have the basic problem, which is college costs a lot more money than most people can afford.
Absolutely. And we need to deal with both of those things. Like we talked about, student loan debt has, it tripled from 2000 to 2016. And over the most recent 15 years, it's doubled. And like we've been talking about, we had doctors and lawyers and people who went to college in the 80s and the 90s, but we didn't have the kind of student loan debt that we have now because we had a different model of financing higher education. And so we need to kind of do a reset on this whole student loan debt thing that we seem to have created really through our public policies for the past 15, 20 years. And also, combined with that, we need to prevent the problem from recreating itself again.
Are there
one of the other
go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in because one of the other kind of angles I'll say that we're seeing on the legislative side is we are actually seeing legislative movement of the government incentivizing employers to jump in to actually help with the student debt problem. And that I would say, while not necessarily a cure for the root cause, it's definitely a significant help to the symptom. And so what I mean by that is just recently we saw passage of a tax incentive whereby an employer can help their employees by literally providing monetary contributions towards their employees' student loans. That type of thing used to be something that would be taxed for the employee. They'd have to pay income tax on it. We just recently saw a new piece of legislation go through that enables an employer to do that tax-free. And so we are actually seeing kind of a growth in employer benefits where employers are offering $50 a month, $100 a month, $200 a month to employees within their communities. And now all of that can be tax-free, which is pretty big. And then I'd say that the other kind of angle that we're seeing on the legislative side that's employer focused is movement towards enabling an employer to offer a 401k contribution. So like a retire or a 403b contribution. So a retirement contribution that's based off of the amount that the employee is paying towards their student loans. So what's interesting there is that, a lot of people in the workforce who have a really high degree of student debt, they're faced with this like trade-off. They're thinking, if I have this much student debt, there's no way that I can contribute to my own retirement fund, which means not only is the individual not contributing, they're often then missing out on their employer's match benefit. So what this kind of structure is doing is it's saying, okay, employee, you take care of your student loan payments. We're going to use that as the basis to then help you really seed that retirement nest egg. So I would say that there are some interesting things happening on the employer side that help ease the pain after the fact. But again, that's after the fact.
Can I jump in with one quick question here?
Well, I want to add to that. I mean, it sounds like a lot of middlemen are going to get rich off of that scheme. Also that it's very regressive. We know because of same thing with health insurance benefits that whenever we give benefits through tax breaks, only those, think about only 47% of America, Mitt Romney informed us, doesn't pay any federal income taxes. So they're not going to benefit at all. Only the people above that. And what's more is that the more income you have, the higher your tax rate and the greater the value of the benefit of a tax break. So it's again going to have racially and gender-based disparate benefits to those people who are going to have different, relationships to the labor market. So it's kind of like a super roundabout way. And similarly, and to the like healthcare situation where we do it, it's also regressive in that way too. But also, we've never dealt with this really high cost of healthcare in the United States where we spend so much more, but we get so much less, right? We have fewer physicians per capita, fewer physician visits per capita, more chronic conditions, much lower life expectancy. We're outliers on that, but we're outliers on price, right? And it taxes every industry in the United States because they all have to pay so much for their employees' healthcare, so much more than it would cost in any other country, largely because of all these middlemen getting rich in the healthcare system as well. So we're just going to have kind of mirroring that situation. Of course, if you're an employee and your employer offers this, you must sign up and you must benefit from it. But I feel like if we're talking structural solutions, I'm not sure that's the one I would reach for first.
I've got to actually follow-up question about that. And Naomi, you're after my own heart on the healthcare stuff. So thank you. Are these programs, are they being given out in an equitable way, or are they tending to go to more higher earning employees? I mean, do we know,
So
do we
they
know who's
actually
getting them? Do
can't.
we know who's being offered them and who's taking people up on them, their companies up on them?
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of the ways that the laws are structured is that you can't actually take advantage of the tax incentives unless you basically there are non-discrimination laws in place with the structure of these benefits. So you cannot design your programs to only favor the most highly compensated people within your company. That being said, especially I would say in light of kind of the trends of the world where we're seeing a lot of kind of traction and adoption of these types of programs is in industries where people are really looking to attract and retain talent. So in other words, higher growth industries. So right now, like healthcare systems, because of COVID, because of everything that's happening, there are a lot of healthcare systems that are strained to attract and retain nurses in particular. A lot of hospital systems are starting to offer these types of benefits because it's a talent lever, right? We're seeing a very similar thing in technology. We're seeing a very similar thing, actually, very interestingly, in manufacturing, because a lot of people are leaving manufacturing-oriented positions to move to other sectors. And so a lot of employers are viewing this as, yes, a talent measure to attract and retain new talent, but then the way that they actually design the programs are typically having to favor often the newest hires who are often less compensated than kind of the richest within their companies. That's what we're seeing.
It would
to
be
date.
nice if they just didn't have any debt and then employers could fight over this talent with wages.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But what I will say, and what's interesting is that, and I see the hand claps. I agree with you. What I think is interesting though, is that I started working in kind of the student debt space from an employer point of view about 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, most of the employers that I spoke with said, what is student debt? Why should I even care? Aren't people just paying it off? I took out student debt when I graduated from school in 1979, and I did it myself. Today, when I walk around and talk to various employers, there is not a single employer that does not recognize that their population is dealing with student debt. There is not a single employer that doesn't recognize that the average debt is upwards of $40,000. And depending on the sector you're in, your employers are carrying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And there are more and more and more employers who are saying, you know what, if we're going to actually require a college degree for this person to get into our company in the first place, we want to actually then do something about it to help them deal with the debt that they had to take out. So yes, is it structurally the best solution? Maybe, maybe not. But right now, realistically, do we probably need solutions coming in from all angles to just help make a change? Like, yeah, probably we do.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in and say, because we have to turn to questions in a minute, because we only have about 10 minutes left. I just want the two of you to really quickly address one issue that has not come up, but is actually a huge part of our student loan crisis in this country, which is the issues that people have who've taken on debt and don't graduate from college. If somebody could quickly address that, and if there, and what that precise issue is and how that's playing into all of this. Naomi, do you want to share?
I'm not sure I have much, it's just that it happens a lot. And I think it might be more likely for people who are returning after like time off, so like adult learners, and then also first generation students who might have to have other family responsibilities, students who are parents, just people with competing priorities, it's going to be more challenging for them to complete the degree. But the debt is going to be there regardless, and it's going to continue to accrue this interest. So it's kind of doubly, you didn't get the income bump and you also still have this like income drain. So it's challenging, I'd imagine.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the things that I've read are that sometimes it's people who have less than $15,000 of total debt who then end up actually carrying it for almost forever. And then to Naomi's point, because of interest, what starts out as $15,000 after 1 year of school and then you drop out it grows and grows and grows and grows. And we're literally seeing like wage garnishment, Social Security garnishment, like awful, awful long-term financial outcomes for people who tried out college for a year, decided it wasn't for them, never were able to then perhaps not make enough money to, be able to pay off the loan debt successfully. And it's a really like dire personal situation then that we're perpetuating there. So.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to turn to questions, and one of the questions actually kind of relates to that sort of situation, which is, I'm going to start with that. Has the student loan debt crisis been driven in part, in full, largely because of additional needs such as housing and food insecurities that people need to borrow money to also pay for?
I think that one of the biggest things that's contributed to the student loan debt problem is actually the student loan debt problem. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that the way that we finance education in this country, to Naomi's point, we don't actually have a strong system of government-backed education that is truly affordable for people. Instead, what we have is a lot of larger institutions that are candidly, they're increasing their tuition rates year over year, and their tuition rates are not really capped. So there's no downward economic pressure to the actual cost of college tuition right now. And part of the reason that there's no downward economic pressure is because there is no limit to the amount that you can take out. And so when you have, and furthermore, there's no requirement of like credit checking or anything along those lines to actually take out a student loan. So when you are asking people to take out a limitless amount of money to then pay for something that they may or may not ultimately be able to afford, we're actually kind of creating the conditions for this to just continue to skyrocket. It is kind of like the housing market in 2008.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm going to have I think I do, the power to do this, but okay, I mean, just to look at what's been happening with student loan debt from 1990 to, 2010, I mean, just to say that I don't think we didn't have a major demographic change over the past 20, 30 years. We haven't had some proliferation of, in fact, teen pregnancies have plummeted. The average age at first birth for a woman is later and later in life, much more after 30. So I don't think it's what's causing this increase. I don't think it could really be tied to any individual households situations or circumstances. Like Asha was saying, it's basically the student loan problem is what caused the student loan problem.
Okay, next question. And I'm sorry, this is all going to be jumping around a bit now. In the Washington of it all, has there been talk about increasing Pell Grants, support for historic Black colleges, income-based repayment plan reform? Can somebody take these issues on for a moment?
I think that there is support for all of those things. And all of them are going to be useful. I think that, in terms of, for example, I want to say in Australia, you're automatically opted into the income-based repayment, which I think makes a lot of sense because there's so much paperwork involved. Even for the loan forgiveness programs that we have in place, for example, there's the public service loan forgiveness, and the administrative hoops are so extreme that, like, in its first year, it was 0.05% of people who applied, mind you, who had worked for 10 years in a public or nonprofit organization. And then they applied and 0.05% of people were accepted, which in numbers, it was like 32,000 people applied and like 18 of them got it. And then they reformed that system in the following year. It was still like 1%, which was, or I don't know, I think, anyway, the numbers are still extremely dire. So definitely we need to fix that situation. If you've been working for 10 years in public service, you should probably just be eligible for that. But again, it's kind of how much do we want to invest in the infrastructure of debt and doing debt better versus just giving people an education and setting up a society in which people can have education without the debt.
Okay. What is the role philanthropy can play in impacting this crisis, if anything?
Well, I do think I'll start by saying, like, I do think that philanthropy, particularly, I mean, You Aspire is a great example of an organization that's actually trying to shed the light on the impact of, the financial aspects of college education alongside the power of a college education for upward mobility. So I do think that there's a role there. Another interesting thing that I've seen, which candidly, it's still new, and I think we have yet to see how this really plays out for the humans involved. But some colleges, and Purdue University comes to mind, and there are a few others, are starting to actually create basically income share agreements as an alternative to debt. And philanthropy then to the university can be routed towards these types of income share agreements. So really that, again, we have yet to see the long-term impacts of that and how successful it is, and do people feel good about it. But the whole idea there is if you graduate from Purdue and you've opted into this income share program, you will pay, I think it's either 8% or 10% of your annual income, regardless of what you're making, for the next, I think it's 10 years. And then you will be done. That's it. And so I think if we start to see more traction from that, we may see kind of the college philanthropy bucket starting to go more towards income share opportunities for new students.
Quick question, Naomi, I want to get your take on income share, but just a quick interjection. My understanding of income share right now is that there's a number of students, or former students, I should say, who have both student loans and income share agreements, which would seem to sort of cut into the point of an income share agreement. But there are, I know, a lot of other issues in it, and I'm going to let Naomi go on, take this from here.
Well, I liked both of those things that you suggested. One just about shedding light, like this organization, I think philanthropies have the power, have convening power. So getting, the people who are being serviced and their representatives, people who care about their needs, in the room with people who control capital. And have more political access, and so that they can understand one another's perspective. Well, mostly so that the people with capital can understand the perspective of the people whose lives are affected by these policies. And then also just donating money that makes school free. So there's a couple of random university programs out there. I want to say the conservatory, the theater program at Yale or something like that, where somebody might have donated a lot of money so that anybody who gets into that program doesn't have to pay any tuition at all. So ideally, rather than even just having one scholarship, having earmarking money to universities to where everybody just pays less now. I guess those are kind of smaller incremental changes, but could be really powerful in people's lives and prevent, if you think about what the interest would be on that money in the future, it could help out. Yeah, income shares, I'm not so sure about. I wouldn't want to share my income personally with anybody. So, I'm not sure if it's better than debt. I guess the fact that there's an endpoint on it might be helpful. But being able to alleviate debt for people and tuition burdens for people through philanthropy could be powerful too.
Okay, one last question, because we have to wrap in about 30 seconds. Would it be recommended for a person that has $10,000 in federal student debt to wait for a decision to be made before making payments on forgiveness, I think this means, or should they keep paying?
Right now you don't have to pay until September, and there's no interest on that money. It's not accruing interest right now. So I feel just wait. Especially if you only have 10,000. Either way, you might as well just wait until September. Yeah, and even that, I think that after 20 years, so there's the 10-year public service thing, and then there's after 20 years, there's some program where after 20 years, I think you get to cancel it, and then that gets taxed as income, but then you set up a payment plan. So basically, if you're paying the minimum for 20 years, and then that gets taxed, and then that's your actual student loan debt. So then you can set up a payment plan with that and just continue paying whatever is the minimum amount forever, and then let it be on your balance sheet and then remove from your balance sheet and just try to pretend it doesn't exist. I feel that's a good plan, but I'm not a financial advisor.
Yeah, that program that Naomi was just referencing, it's called Repay. and it stands for the Revised Pay As You Earn Plan. And it's one of the many income-driven repayment plans offered by the federal government. So I do think that one in particular is a powerful one because it's one of the only that does offer that kind of forgiveness at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. And this is where, and I'm sorry, I have to stop and turn this back over to Jacqueline. We have a bunch more questions and they're all great. So my apologies to the audience, but before I turn this back to Jacqueline, I want to just thank Asha and Naomi for such an incredibly great discussion. Jacqueline, take this away.
Thanks, Helene. Asha, Naomi, wow. I am just completely speechless of how much was covered in such a short amount of time, but just the power that the three of you have represented for everyone on this phone call today and those who will watch the video later. I just want to pause, Naomi, and highlight a phrase that you said: if we choose to invest in education. These are all choices. And you gave so many examples of other countries, and it really just continues to have me look internally, look at ourselves, and we just have to make different choices. And granted, we all can't make those choices on behalf of the federal government on this phone call right now, but that is at the crux of this crisis. The choices that we make when we cast our ballots, the choices that our representatives make, the choices that we all have to help guide this issue and actually create lasting solutions, because this is a solvable problem. We have to choose to make those solutions and unlock those solutions. I want to say how critically important it is to have these opportunities to come together, to think big, to discuss, to grapple with these types of crises that we continue to go through. Naomi, thank you for showing that chart because of the interconnectedness of different generational decisions that we see being made and changes happening, but yet we're still seeing that red line just skyrocket up off of the charts, literally. Helene, as you mentioned, $1.7 trillion in student loan debt does not happen overnight. And when we think about what COVID, racial reckoning, economic uncertainty has done for all of us over the last year, getting close to the March 13th date, right? For the last year, this issue will continue to be exacerbated for millions of students without big change, and how the pandemic has irrevocably threatened the pursuit and completion of a degree, yet alone an affordable degree. So I'm truly excited for what this day will unlock. I wish we were all in a room together so that we can continue the conversations and continue the chats. But as You Aspire CEO, I commit to each of you today that we will do our part, our preventative approach, so that students and families have the information, have the resources, have the understanding and ways in which they can chart a different path for themselves to an affordable degree. We can't do it alone. And so that I ask each of you, regardless of the seat that you're sitting in today, to make a commitment, take an action. If you're K-12, higher education, policy, or working in the government systems on this call today, what can you do to take different steps to make this a more solvable problem in the short-term future? Question about philanthropy, the business community, corporations. Asha, to your point, there isn't a single employer that you've talked to that doesn't think about and understand how this crisis affects their employees. What can you do to make a commitment and to help solve this problem? One thing, of course, I'm sure you're all expecting, is to invest in organizations like You Aspire, our policy and systems change work, also the front line information and resources that we have for students and families. We can do so much more with continued investment from the caring philanthropies, businesses, individuals that each of you represent and have represented for us in the past. So thank you for your ongoing support. And again, together, we'll only be able to solve this problem and to create new partnerships, to unlock new innovations, and really make a change and really be a leader in this work. And so other countries can look to us and say, wow, they've really made a change. How can we continue to do that too? We've lost that edge, unfortunately, but how can we get it back? And how can this group here today start to put those pieces in place? So thank you very much for your time today. I will pass it back over to Jermaine to close us out. And I look forward to hearing how this conversation will continue. And also please reach out to any of us here at UAspire for further partnership and conversation together. Thank you.
Thank you for joining today's presentation. This recording will be shared with all those in attendance. We look forward to seeing you at our next event sometime in the future. Thank you, Helene, Asha, and Naomi, for a fantastic conversation. Be well and enjoy the rest of your day.